more than 300,000 years, after the start of the project to create a new intelligent human being on Earth, by combining extraterrestrial DNA with the DNA of the large primates that existed at that time. The DNA of the ENK branch has become complex, thanks to the multiple combinations that have taken place over time, either with DNA from other extraterrestrial civilizations or with ENL human beings. The remarkable evolution of the ENK branch. This was achieved through mutual understanding between representatives of alien civilizations, who were interested in hybridizing the new race of beings that had spread across the globe. But while the ENL beings were carefully cultivated, and their evolution was assisted by the beneficial alien civilizations, the ENK beings were left somewhat to develop on their own. This plan had been laid out in advance, so that diversity could be achieved even within the same race. The experiment showed that, although the ENK branch developed much more slowly, being left to the laws of nature, it acquired a special vital force, being closely linked to the Earth and nature. However, some of these beings have been hybridized with alien DNA, creating even greater complexity in their abilities and capabilities, but for the most part the ENK branch has been left to evolve on its own. So the qualitative hierarchy of beings that existed on our planet at that time was based on the small group of EN beings with mostly Syrian DNA. They were somewhat elite, in the sense that their genetic structure was so highly evolved, that at that time they could only combine with a very small number of other highly evolved extraterrestrial beings. From the EN group of beings, came the refined ENL beings and the ENK beings through specialization. The latter evolved at their own natural pace, because in the early days, the vibrational frequency difference between ENL and ENK was too great to allow natural and efficient combinations between individuals of these two branches. However, some combinations between the L branch and the K branch have been possible and have occurred over time, as I said. The resulting DNA was a secondary branch of ENK beings, with a more refined consciousness, coupled with good vital rooting on the planet. They were strong beings, capable of great effort, but at the same time having a more evolved level of consciousness than the majority of the ENK population, who only combined with each other. Those higher and more powerful ENK beings were the so-called demigods mentioned in ancient literature. At the great meetings between representatives of the extraterrestrial civilizations then visiting Earth, however, it was agreed that the higher branch, which had derived from the K branch, should not be further supported. I didn't quite understand why such a decision was made, because I then became very interested in those councils of alien beings. However, a valid hypothesis would be, as I said before, that the representatives of alien civilizations wanted the ENK branch to be closer to the specific Earth, without too much alien influence in its specific DNA, as could be seen, for example, in the case of ENL beings. The first high-level recognition of the evolution of ENK beings occurred about 28,000 years ago. At that time, the demigods were admitted to the planet's highest decision-making forum, made up of members of the advanced alien civilizations that were on Earth, as well as representatives of the ENL branch. I was shown summary excerpts from the Great Planetary Council that met at that time, in the place we now call Teotihuacan, Mexico. Planetary Council Directives of 26,000 BC. In many ways, that multicolored meeting of alien civilizations that shepherded the nascent DNA of the human being, was a turning point in the evolution of humanity on Earth. Territories were demarcated, agreements and understandings were established, certain codes of interracial behavior were enforced, and crucial decisions were made about the future of human beings and life on our planet. That council made a particular impression on me because of the size, complexity and value of the decisions it made about the destiny of humanity. Generally speaking, such issues are little known, and if they are revealed to people, they tend to take them for granted. This is mainly because the common man does not have access to direct information of this kind, and also because he tends to think according to the rules, laws and ideas that are currently being bandied about. Of these, the most outrageous and oft repeated are the ideas that we may be alone in the universe, that science has pretty much solved everything that needs solving so far, and that contemporary civilization is the most developed that has ever existed on the planet. However, for those who are intelligent and have common sense, such statements are just the fruit of ignorance and the manifestation of a very arrogant vision. For my part, I have faith that at least some of those who are truly prepared can intuitively understand what I am presenting here. Even if my accounts are a serious test for current conceptions, this information clears up a whole series of confusing, unclear or erroneous elements regarding the history of humanity and its origin. After all I am doing is to present as accurately as possible what I have personally seen and discussed, on this very vast and complex subject. But it is up to the reader to decide whether or not to accept the information thus made available. I return to the issues related to the main decisions taken at that great planetary council, and to highlight some of their nuances. The admission of the ENK beings into the Planetary Collaborative Forum, and the recognition of the level of evolution they had reached, was also related to the fact that the leading representatives of the Grand Council had an even deeper interest than simply populating a planet with a new race of beings. Indeed, the original plan was to create a new intelligent and complexly developed humanoid being in the universe. After more than 300,000 years, this plan had already taken shape and had even evolved unexpectedly quickly, if we think of the natural course of things and consider it on a cosmic scale. This is why the Great Planetary Council of Teotihuacan in 26,000 BC was practically the beginning of the withdrawal of the higher alien races from involvement in the life of the new humanity. The main goal of the original project was to create a superior human being and populate the planet with this newly created being. Since the ENK branch had shown a surprising capacity for fertility and adaptation to various kinds of external influences, as well as DNA, it had somehow acquired the right to take over the planet and evolve freely here. In contrast, the ENL branch, though more evolved both spiritually and in other characteristics than the ENK branch, was still more fragile in terms of genetic structure and vitality, so that it could not have sustained a continuous and vigorous development of the new race of beings. Besides, as I said, the ENL beings had already begun to withdraw from the physical plane, and their existence was gradually replaced by myths and legends. However, the L branch made an important contribution to refining part of the K branch. Therefore, the Syrians and the other main alien civilizations involved in the project to create the new being on Earth considered the ENK gene strong enough to carry on the project, which was now following a natural path. Sovereign oversight of these extraterrestrial civilizations continued to exist, especially to stop attempts at self-destruction of civilization through devastating planetary wars, or the use of terrible and highly advanced technologies, by both humans and other extraterrestrial civilizations, that showed some interest in life on this planet. However, that small group of highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations did so with a high level of spiritual knowledge, without interfering where the course of destiny had to take a certain shape for mankind. Specialization of human DNA. After the segmentation of human DNA, in the sense that certain extraterrestrial civilizations began to create more nurseries of it, in various parts of the Earth, the DNA of the human being unraveled in various particular directions, somehow losing the power of the whole. In other words, the ENK beings on these offshoots, which were ENK, A, ENKI, ENK, U, etc., no longer had the same strengths and powers as ENL beings, because their DNA had specialized over time in a particular direction, induced and developed in particular by an alien civilization. Each of the extraterrestrial civilizations that participated in the nursery program of human civilization on Earth contributed in some proportion with its DNA to the complexity of human DNA, thus shepherding a certain population on the globe, which was assigned to it at the Great Planetary Council of Teotihuacan, because there the zones of influence of each extraterrestrial civilization that was involved in the project were assigned. Basically, their representatives took over under close supervision the evolution and development of the human beings then inhabiting the Earth, mostly belonging to the ENK branch, within the territories they occupied. That is why we can observe very different influences and characteristics in the races and even populations of certain areas of the planet. For political reasons, however, I have been advised not to present details in this direction in the book. The demigods. One of the important decisions that was made at the Great Planetary Council at Teotihuacan was that the ENK branch be allowed to begin to self-govern. In other words, the ENK beings were allowed to have their own territories and even to contribute to the planetary discussions and decisions that took place at certain intervals, which is why they were invited to be represented at that great council. This was in recognition of the fact that they had evolved sufficiently to have a relatively high degree of responsibility, and that they could be properly integrated into the spiral of planetary progress. However, it was obvious from what we saw in the pictures that the ENK beings were listening to the directions, advice and directives that were being given by the sages of the alien civilizations, who were overseeing the entire planet and whom they rightly considered to be their parents. I noticed that the ENK high branch members of the council were very harmonious, strong, willing beings. I was attracted by their particular radiation, which had a special magnetism, and I turned my attention to these aspects, related to their participation in the Great Council of the planet. Immediately I was shown a succession of representative images, and to the right of the screen I saw a rich array of other directories. However, I preferred to watch the synthesis of the images, because the particular study of those files would have meant too much time, which I did not have at my disposal. Combining the images with the telepathic intuitive transmissions I was receiving through the interdimensional headset, I realized that the ENK branch had evolved remarkably as a whole, characterized above all by the complexity of its DNA structure. This made its possibilities for combining with other DNA astonishing. In addition, it gave those beings a special radiance, a physical and magnetic beauty that was easily fascinating. Besides, as I have seen, the ENK delegation was made up of only demigods, both male and female. Because they were closer to our way of perceiving things and manifesting ourselves, our tendencies and our way of being, I was very attracted to those images, because on some level the ENK delegation made a strong impression on the other alien beings. The most representative were the ENK women. They had an extraordinary impact and a kind of irresistible attraction, that undoubtedly stemmed from the complexity of their DNA structure, and especially from a special something common only to human beings who were created on Earth. If I were to make a comparison, however, then I would say that their radiation was most similar to that of the Pleiadian women. Many representatives of other species and extraterrestrial civilizations courted them, precisely for their extraordinary fertility and ability to give life at a high level of complexity. In this sense there was a kind of turnover of many alien civilizations, which from time to time came and replenished their gene pool, even with the more special ENK beings. Diversification of DNA in ENK beings. More than 100,000 years ago the planet was divided into several territories, each with its own specific population, which was supported, protected and helped to evolve by one or even more alien civilizations. Therefore each such area on Earth had its own soul or egregore, which was the egregore of that population. Representatives of the governing civilization would come from time to time and run their own DNA with that of the population of that area, because the richness of resonance frequencies in the DNA macromolecule structure of ENK beings was so great that it easily allowed such combinations. Therefore, every population or civilization on Earth had its gods, which in those cases were the evolved extraterrestrial beings, supporting the specific development of a branch of human beings. This was important, because in this way some alien civilizations could fortify their tired or degenerated DNA, gaining a new impetus towards existence and evolution, while others seeded other civilizations on other planets with DNA samples taken mainly from ENK beings, in order to help the evolution of those civilizations in the cosmos. I was shown the DNA structure of beings from several planets in the galaxy, which was based on the DNA of the human being. Practically speaking, and paradoxical as it may seem, we can say that in a certain way we are also the parents of many civilizations in the galaxy. After the great extraterrestrial space conflict in the vicinity of Earth, the ENK branch somewhat drifted, because for a long time there was no clear order of extraterrestrial territories and influences. Then the Galactic Alliance was rebuilt, things started to get back to normal, but it was only after the Great Planetary Council that the territories of alien influence over ENK populations were again established, and reoriented according to new rules. The exceptional characteristics of human DNA at that time led the Planetary Council to include ENK beings in the planetary decision-making chain, and also to give them freedom of expression and autonomy, as the level of evolution ENK beings had reached justified that decision. It is true, however, that the spiritual aspect or that of inner perception, of refinement of consciousness or of higher understanding was not very developed in ENK beings, as I could notice in members of certain extraterrestrial civilizations and in human beings of the ENL branch. However, the ENK beings of that time, those who represented the demigods, were incomparably more evolved, more intelligent and more full of qualities than contemporary man. As we shall see, the involution occurred especially from the last period of Atlantis, and culminated in its total sinking, when even these evolved ENK beings began to retreat from the Earth's surface. The maturation of mankind. Another very important decision that was taken at the Great Council of Teotihuacan was to begin the sequential withdrawal of the concrete extraterrestrial presence from the lives of Earthlings. Surveillance was thus gradually transferred from direct involvement on the Earth's surface to careful monitoring by technological means on the physical as well as the etheric plane. In their wisdom, these highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations were well aware that a civilization must evolve on its own feet to have a chance of correctly understanding its purpose and future in the universe. In fact, this is a natural law that governs all kingdoms. The child reaches an age at which, being mature enough, it separates from its parents to follow its own path in life. However, this had to be done in stages, because the process of creating the human being was and is based on great knowledge, patience and wisdom. Even so, there was the unfortunate event of the downfall and sinking of the civilization of Atlantis, which I will deal with separately, but which is an example of how unstable and delicate things can become in the context of the evolution of beings.